Hey, what's going on, guys? So I'm in the Bay Area of California right now at this place. This is EAST Bay Vivarium, and I just filmed an episode here for Reptile Adventures, but they don't just do reptiles here. They have a really awesome assortment of arachnids here as well. So I'm going to meet with Jessica, their arachnid person at EAST Bay Vivarium, and she's going to show off some of the really awesome tarantulas that they have here at EAST Bay Vivarium. So here is Jessica, and we have a couple of really cool arachnids here. What are we looking at?
So we are looking at a Chaco golden knee, also known as a Grammostola poker piece by its Latin name. This is a vinegroon, something a little different. These guys are probably one of the older species of bugs, but it's somewhat harmless. Those big giant claws you see in the front, which are its palps, are used to grab like prey, like little insects, bugs, crickets, worms, what have you. And then they tend to store that excess nutrients that they gather from that food in the base of their tail over there. Now they're called vinegroons because their main source of defense is to shoot a very mild acid from the base of their tail, but it's just to be a very pungent smell to kind of warn off predators. Like, hey, don't eat me, I don't taste very good. This is technically more closer to a tarantula than a scorpion.
Right.
So even though it looks more scorpion-like. But both of these are pretty good for beginners just because they're virtually harmless. The likelihood of you getting bit by something like this is pretty unlikely, but still possible. But the venom is pretty mild, so that's why we typically recommend them for beginners. And a lot of the times you can find babies for these for sale, which are a little bit more fragile and require a little bit more detail-oriented care, but it's still fairly easy. So, and then the Chaco golden knee, this female, as you can see based on the bulbousness of her bottom, she is quite big. That's pretty much a full-grown female. And they're quite pink with the golden knees, hence the name Chaco golden knee. This is a South American tarantula, pretty common in the captive trade, and very handleable for beginner owners. Sometimes they can kick hairs. The irritating hairs can be a little itchy on the skin, but if you are really good about checking the behavior of your spider by kind of, gently brushing their bottom, she'll see how she wiggled a little. So she's a little just uncomfortable, but she's not hating it. If she really hated it, she would have turned around and grabbed it. So you can typically tell based off of that alone how your tarantula will deal with you handling it that day. Do you want to go take a look at the other spiders and critters that we have?
Yes, we want to see the other spiders and critters that you have, and that's over on the other side of the shop over here. All right, so here we have the main display of arachnids here.
Yeah, so a lot of the South American stuff that we have is like the curly hair tarantula, which is kind of similar to the Chaco golden knee we were talking about earlier. But from time to time we do carry, and I say from time to time, but really it's almost all the time, we carry old world stuff. And so you typically can separate a lot of these arachnids and inverts based off of two different timelines of when the world was kind of changing, which is New World and Old World. So kind of the simple way to put it, that I like to put it for a lot of the people that come in looking for pets and stuff, is New World tends to come with a lot of secondary defense mechanisms like the kicking of the hairs, and the Old World stuff tends to not be able to do stuff like that. So if you have a little, if you're more skin sensitive, people tend to like Old World stuff, but Old World stuff tends to have a more potent venom.
That's right, I was just going to say that, yep.
So, but for the most part, in terms of care, these guys are pretty hardy. We always want to remember that even though some of these are captive bred, they've still evolved over time to handle some really tough circumstances in the environment. There's always not plentiful amount of food available. Sometimes there's a dry season. Sometimes it's a little too wet. And so a lot of these guys will burrow or climb out and will find ways to kind of avoid that. And so we try not to get it too wet in there and try to keep it in nice conditions, or try to offer both, something a little bit more moist and something a little bit more dry. So you can see I had a more vertical cork flat in there for the curly hair tarantula, because they tend to like to climb from time to time, even though they're mostly burrowing tarantulas. So I like to give them that option if they'd like to use that. You can kind of see some of the other ones are a little more up against the wall and stuff. So yeah, and then a little bit of webbing that they do. These guys also will kick hairs, and this is also a New World tarantula, but the venom is pretty mild, virtually equivalent to a bee sting. The only difference is that a bee has one stinger and the bees have two hooked fangs.
That's right.
So
the delivery system is a little bit more formidable with these.
Yes. But a lot of us here have at least a basic knowledge of the bugs, and then some of us have a little bit more extensive knowledge. I definitely started not really knowing a lot, and then just based off of like my own irrational fears, I kind of threw myself into the world of bugs. And
Well,
thank you so much.
and that's a story that is shared with a lot of people, is that they had a fear, they wanted to get over that fear, and as they got over that fear, they fell in love with them.
Yeah, and I am the same way. I think a lot of it is just fear of the unknown, not knowing how they feel when they walk on us, not knowing how to read their behavior and their body language. So
Right.
all of these things tends to be a little scary for humans. I mean, our basic instinct is to survive, and so if someone from Hollywood shows us that a spider can virtually kill you, then
That's what you believe?
that's what you that's what
Unfortunately.
you feel, and that's what you think. So sometimes these guys are a little shy, so I'm gonna pull this little hide out from him. It's not gonna like that too much, so just make sure you watch the hairs, because these guys can kick hairs. But you can kind of see, not quite as colorful, but the banding on it to show the distinctness of like the knees, hence the name of the striped knee.
Right.
So yeah, this spider I would say would probably prefer a more dry, arid environment, but occasionally would kind of benefit from a misting when it's like molting and stuff.
Sure.
I would say that molting would probably be one of the tarantula's most vulnerable points, because they cannot move, and it can take somewhere from as little as 12 hours up to 72 hours to completely shed its exoskeleton. And in that time, they are very, very fragile and can be susceptible to predators. So we tend to try to make it as comfortable for them as possible. So when keeping your tarantula, it's important to make sure you know when they are molting, and the same thing goes with scorpions. You know, all of these invertebrates will shed their exoskeleton at some point, and so at some point we'll be vulnerable, and we want to make sure we don't feed them, because crickets and worms can tend to eat other bugs too.
Now, is there a sign that an animal like that is going to start molting? Is there any pre-signs, or you just know when they're actually starting to molt? Is there like a pre-molt?
Yeah, there's so the pre-molt typically consists of a week of not feeding. The spider will typically not eat and will be still for a lot of the points throughout the day. It'll probably be in burrow too, and then right before it'll molt, it'll kind of appear in this death crawl, which is the very common scary point for a lot of new keepers, where they find their spider upside down and kind of shriveled up, and it looks like your spider is dead, but it is actually pushing its skin out upwards and then will flip back up once it's done. So yeah, they molt upside down. So if you see your spider upside down, it's probably not dead. Give it a full 72 hours, and then if it still doesn't look good, then consult a professional.
So I see you've got an Indian ornamental, which is one of my favorite tarantulas. I just want to really kind of show him off and take a good look at him.
Yeah. This is actually one of my favorites too. I actually have I don't mean to say I only exclusively collect these, but I am a big fan of the pokies. I have one of these myself. It's a little one though, so not quite as big. And this one is a good size.
Oh, look at that beauty. These are, like I said, these are one of my favorite tarantulas, and I know that these are a lot of collectors' favorites as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of local breeders, I believe, in the area that produce a lot of babies of these. So because they are so popular and quite easy to afford for the pokies, they can be popular. Not typically recommended for beginners, just because of their flighty tendencies, and you know, I wouldn't say they're aggressive species. They're not going to come out and defend their territory with you, but their venom is not fun.
So this is the Singapore blue.
And these guys are also not typically recommended for beginners. You can kind of see the bluish hue though, and it's and these spiders are typically known for climbing more, but because these guys were so shy upon coming in.
He looks like a male, doesn't he?
He does, doesn't he?
All right, so these are the slings here, and now a lot of these just came in within the past couple of days, you said.
Yeah, I would say like the Bolivian dwarf, the Trinidad dwarf. So as you can see, like the dwarfs are have always been a really popular species, and as these guys become more popular, I would say that they're kind of a higher demand for them, just because they're relatively smaller tarantulas, and even though they're not quite handleable, not all keepers are interested in handling their bugs. Some of them are just purely interested in learning about their behavior, their care, and just enjoying the view of their existence.
All right, so this sling is a pink toe.
It's a metallic pink toe tarantula, Avicularia metallica. So they tend to get bigger than the avic species that most people are familiar with. The babies tend to all look very similar though, except for the Caribbean and Versa colors. Those tend to be more of a vibrant blue, but kind of in the pink toe family. And then this is a really popular one. This is actually my first tarantula. when I first got into keeping. So I'd say this is probably one of the really popular ones for beginners. And even though it is an arboreal species that requires high humidity, their mortality rate is pretty low. So I like to recommend them for beginners that are trying to get into keeping slings, since slings are a little more fragile.
Sure.
These tend to be a little hardier.
All right, so this is a sling of an Indian ornamental.
Yeah, I would say it's probably not quite a sling anymore. It's probably within that really awkward juvenile subadult stage where it's
the
like
in-between stage.
The awkward in-between stage.
Yes. All right, so since we're in California, we have to show off the native stuff. That is one of my favorite scorpion species. That is a desert hairy.
I believe these ones in particular came from Arizona. Try not to sell a lot of the wild-caught California species here.
What is the overall care for a desert hairy scorpion?
I would say it's very, very simple. It's nice to have a water dish there for them, but as you can see, if I put water in there, he'll kick a bunch of sand in there to help it evaporate faster, which tells me he doesn't really want that there.
Right.
So very minimalistic water, but still want that present. Feeding about once a week, and you can usually tell the weight and the fattiness of your scorpion based off of this part right, just its main body point. If it was really, really skinny, you would be able to tell because they do lose body mass if they go long periods of time without food. Thankfully, that takes a really, really long time, so if you forget to feed your scorpion for a month at this size, I would say you're probably fine.
Right,
and it'll probably be a little hungry, and if you try to handle it within that point, it won't be too happy. But the venom on these guys is not super bad either. The stinger definitely looks pretty intimidating, but they don't really want to sting you. So, just always remember flat hands and keep your scorpion well fed.
Yeah. Well, if you are forgetting to feed your scorpion for a whole month, you should not be keeping scorpions.
This is
or
true.
any other animal for that matter.
Yes.
Well, this is fantastic. So we have just completely destroyed your display here for you to show us all this stuff, and I really appreciate you kind of showing us some of the really cool tarantulas that you have here at East Bay Vivarium. Thank you so much for showing us. This stuff is awesome.
Yes, it is.
So guys, I just want to thank Jessica for showing us these amazing tarantulas and other arachnids here at East Bay Vivarium. I want to thank Owen and John, the owners of East Bay Vivarium, for having us out here. I also filmed a tour of the reptile shop here at East Bay Vivarium, and that is on my other channel, Dāv Kaufman's Reptile Adventures. That link is in the description below. So guys, as always, thanks for watching, and until the next animal adventure, love the planet and rattle on.